because I got the chat box open or the question box open. Come on.
Will we be able to see that?
You will see it.
Okay.
You should be able to see it on the right-hand side. You'll see a thing that says comments. You see it?
I honestly don't. All it says is you're in the show. Okay. Everyone can see and hear you.
What I'll do is when people ask comments, I'm able to pin them on the bottom here, and you can see them. You'll be able to see if somebody asks a question or stuff. So
cool.
We are live now. So I want to thank everybody for joining us again for Gilbert's Smaug vlog live from Smaug's cave. And today I got my good friend Ken Schlotfeldt from Badger Airbrush. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing great, Gil. You actually said my name right.
Schlotfeldt. That's how you say it, right?
Well, yeah, but most people, a lot of people know it's Schlotfeldt or Schlotfeldt, or even my wife of 37 years can't pronounce it yet.
I see you got one of your old baseball jerseys behind you there.
Yeah, absolutely. The Badgers. That was from the live feed a couple weeks ago when people had to guess my number.
Yeah, see, because usually when you do the live feed, it's reversed. So this way, everybody can see it, not reversed.
Yeah, well, you're one of those guys that's sophisticated enough to make the camera stuff work. So
there's a couple of things I wanted to get here. A lot of people, they ask me, how old is Badger? How did it start? And I don't know all that. So, I mean, I know the history of your company, but let's start out with that.
What? I'm as old as Badger. Badger's 56. I'm 56. Actually, Badger's 57, but it started late 1963. It didn't start manufacturing and shipping product till 64. But I was born January 4th, 1964. So, and generally, and I'm 56 years old now. And what I actually tell people when I get that question is that I was the inspiration for the company. You know, that when I was born, my dad became inspired to start an airbrush company. You know, my dad, when he was alive, and I used to say that, he used to say I was the reason he had to get out of the house, so he started an airbrush.
Now, what made it was your dad that started the company, am I correct?
Yeah.
Now, why a airbrush company?
Well, a lot of that had to do with my grandfather owned a screw machine company in suburban Chicago, and that screw machine company, which my dad worked for, he was one of 8 foremen. It was a very large screw machine operation for its time, and it had 8 foremen that worked different machine groups and parts manufacturing categories. And my father was one of those 8 foremen, and he happened to be in charge of the area that did the airbrush part jobs. They were making parts for Pache and Theron Chandler and for Wold Airbrush, who were all located here in suburban Chicago. And my dad got intrigued by airbrush as a result of doing these parts. And because of that intrigue, he started tinkering with his own design ideas for airbrushes, looked into them a little bit, and hey, I just lost you. Where'd you go, Gil?
I put the camera on you, so while you're speaking, I'll move the camera back.
Oh, Jesus Christ. I just got larger. It scared the hell out of me. I thought I put on another 20 pounds, and my wife was really going to be pissed when I got home. But anyhow, my dad was a foreman on all the machines and the jobs that ran the airbrush parts, and he got intrigued by it, and he started playing with his own design ideas. And you know, way back in the early 60s, airbrushes were such that you could actually wear an airbrush out, and at that point you had to dispose of it. So it was an item that it was made to last, depending on how much you used it, really 5 to 10 years. And then the seal ability of the airbrush would get diminished to the point that you'd have to get a new one, because the seal was simply metal on metal and parts being made to tolerances and dimensions that prevented paint from leaking into the rear section of the airbrush. So my dad came up with the idea to put a seal inside of the airbrush that could be replaced, so that when you wore out the seal, rather than having to buy a new airbrush, you could just replace the seal, which was, for the dollar amount at the time, was a lot less expensive than buying a new airbrush entirely. So now any airbrush you buy, whether it's a Badger, a Pache, an Iwata, any of them, even the stuff that comes in from China, they all have replaceable seals. Most of them made of Teflon, or a material called PTFE, which is the non-trademark version of Teflon. And Teflon is an interesting material because it's considered self-lubricating, and it has an extremely low wear factor on it. So when the stainless steel needle is going back and forth through that seal inside, it's sealing and it's not wearing. So that seal will last a long time. But if and when it does wear out, you could just pop it out, put a new seal in, and replace it. So that was one of my dad's first innovations, was to make airbrushes essentially last a lifetime. In fact, that seal on the original Badger airbrushes, and still today, has a lifetime warranty on it, that we do free factory replacement of it if it ever wears out and needs to be replaced. And now we also sell the tools for it. But the other thing that at that time, side feed airbrushes were far more popular, in part because the places where airbrushes were most used were illustrators and photo retouchers. And photo retouchers use side feed airbrushes because they used to work pretty much straight up and down over the surface they were working on to amend the photos that they were retouching. So they needed an ability to swivel the color cup, so they used side feed airbrushes. But color cups at the time, they had pointed bottoms on them, so you had to have this little stand. So when you took the color cup out, perhaps you had 3 or 4 color cups for different colors you would use. When you took the color cup out, you had to put it in this little stand, because if you didn't, it would fall over, and if there was still paint in it, you'd have a mess. So if you lost the stands and you didn't have as many stands, you had color cups, either jerry-rigged something or, stop using that particular color cup. But my dad decided to create a color cup with a flat bottom on it, so it would just stand up on its own. And that was his other innovation: freestanding color cups and Teflon seals. And originally, he took those ideas to George Thayer, who was still at Thayer and Chandler at the time, and presented the ideas. And George Thayer, as my dad told me, it was kind of a condescending, Sonny, if we could make the airbrush better, we'd make it better. So thank you for your idea, but we're not interested. And my dad just kind of let it go because he didn't want to jeopardize any business for his father's business. And about I think it was about 6 months later, a guy by the name of August Jeske, who when I was a little pipsqueak, I used to call Uncle Augie once I came to know him. He was the sales director at Thayer, and he had one of those take your job and shove it moments. And with George Thayer, and he came to my dad shortly after and said, "Hey, I think we can sell your airbrush designs." And that was essentially the genesis for Badger to start going. Was August Jeske knew all of the customers of Thayer and Chandler, and he felt with my dad's design modifications, he could have a viable reason to convert them from Thayer and Chandler to Badger airbrush products. And lo and behold, that's how Badger got started. And the first 3 years, Gil, Badger was an absolute failure. It didn't do well at all. There really wasn't place for a new airbrush company. Wasn't really a need for it, so the dealers and stuff didn't really get excited about it. But my dad lived next door to a guy who worked for Testers Corporation. And he was showing my dad, and at the time, airbrushes weren't really used in fine scale modeling at all. It was kind of an unknown thing at that time for the fine scale modeler. So my dad showed it to the guy from Testers, and he liked the idea, and he was pretty high up in the hierarchy at Testers at the time. He might have been the sales director or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And he saw the downside to it, that no one doing fine scale models was going to pay $70, $80 for something to paint the model with, when they had spray cans and paintbrushes and stuff they were using already. And what happened as a result of that is, if you're familiar with our, well, for lack of a better term, lower end product, more budget oriented product, our Model 250 spray gun. It's a little plastic gun. It's external mix. Mm-hmm. As a result of the conversation with the guy from Testers, my dad designed this little spray gun that could be available and sold for, I think at the time when it hit the market, his goal was $10. I think they got it to market for $12.95 originally. And it was basically, and anyone who still uses them knows this, it's a refined spray can. It gives you a pattern that can be as voluminous as a spray can, but can be brought down to a finer pattern. Nothing really intricate, but for the guy who at that time was painting his models all one color, wasn't doing a lot of weathering and stuff with a spray tool. If he was doing that, he was doing it with chalks and pastels and paintbrushes and stuff. And that 250 gun enabled Badger to take off, because once that hit the market, he had this much broader, larger fine scale modeling community that had an interest in this product. A lot of people, 50 plus years ago, bought Badger 250s because it was kind of, this is the new cool thing to paint your model with, that's better than a spray can and better than a paintbrush, and that introduced Badger, and as a result, airbrushes in general, to the very large fine scale model community. Even back then, there were a lot more guys building models than there were guys doing illustrations and photo retouching. Mm-hmm. Illustration and photo retouching was a profession. Fine scale modeling was a hobby.
Right.
People. So, and that's really what enabled Badger to get a foothold for its business. And after the first 3 years of failure, the 250 enabled Badger to really take off, which is very interesting, because if that hadn't happened with the 250, there wouldn't be a Badger today, because the arrangement with Badger was, when my dad started it, my grandfather shut down the screw machine business, and he took the 7 other foremen and he put them all in business for themselves. And he gave them a group of machines, primarily the ones they were already responsible for. And he gave them the entire Walter Precision Company. That was the name of my grandfather's company.
Is that the building that's behind where you're at now?
Yeah, you've seen it.
Yeah.
That's the building. It's kitty corner, and across the street from us, that's where my grandfather's company was, Walter Precision. Of course, Walter Precision was named after my dad. Mm-hmm. My dad's name was Walter. But he took those other 7 foremen and he gave them their group of equipment, and he gave them the full Walter Precision customer list. And he said, I'm closing this up. You guys each have your own business. You got to find a place to locate it, blah, blah, blah. And the deal is, my son's starting an airbrush company that's going to run out of this building. You need to give him his parts for free for 3 years. That's how you pay me for your business. So essentially, my dad had 3 years to make it work with minimal capital investment in it. And really, it wasn't going to make it after that 3 years. And the 250 was timed, not by intention, just right, happened to fall into place at the time it needed to for Badger to go on and exist and survive. And, the irony of it for me personally is the fact that in the 1990s, I later acquired Theron Chandler, which was the company my dad initially brought his ideas to with it. But yeah, so I mean, that's a little bit of history of how Badger got going. One of the things that I found cool about Badger, as far as American manufacturing goes, is I still, of those 7 other companies, 6 of them still exist, and the sixth, one of the 6 consumed the 7th. We still do business with those companies. I'm working with the sons of people that my dad used to work next to at Walter Precision Company. So, although what we primarily do here is assembly, soldering, tumbling, drilling, stuff like that, all secondary stuff. We actually have our hands in employment of, companies around us that make Badger, I think, a kind of unique and important company to the companies we buy parts from and do business with still today for many years.
See, now that I wanted to get to that because I when you talk to a bunch of people, you know how the chatter about airbrushes, you've heard it a billion times probably. But
I have no idea what you're talking about, Gilbert. Why don't you tell me what you're talking about?
What I'm talking about is,
Gilbert, I'm joking.
I know you are. You're always busting my chops. I know that. I love it. But your airbrushes are made in the U.S. They're made here, right? They're milled here. They're made here, etc.
Yeah.
Of course, parts you have to go out, outside of your building to get and stuff like that. But they're all made in the U.S.
Yeah, of our turn parts suppliers, I would say 95% of them are here in the Chicago area. We have a couple from other surrounding states. Our furthest supplier for turn parts is in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And that's something that relationship we got into because if you're familiar with the Hobby Pal and the Model Pal, which are 2 things you can use to like hold windows and stuff for the model when you're trying to put them into place and stuff like that. The company that those items that we make, or we don't make them, that we sell to do that with, the company that makes things for computer chipboards and stuff, they make these little suction cup devices for holding that. And we met up with them at a show completely unrelated to anything airbrush. And we saw it and we said, I bet you model builders could use those little suction cup thingies to hold parts for their models and stuff. So we started buying those from them and came to find out when I went to visit them, they actually have a huge screw machine operation in their building. So we started buying parts from them. They started quoting parts. But that's our furthest turn part suppliers in Colorado Springs. Everyone else is pretty much Wisconsin, Indiana, Illinois. But the lion's share of it is all suburban Chicago or in Chicago itself here.
The other thing is, I'm surprised that whenever, people ask about a Badger, and they'll show me an airbrush and I'm like, that's a Badger. Oh, no, it's, whatever name it is. I'm like, no, that's a Badger. They don't realize how many different airbrushes you make for different people.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's, there's a great amount of a feeling of accomplishment when you make a product so well, someone else wants to put their name on it. Because no one is ever going to jeopardize their own good name, and they're not going to ask you to do that unless they have a confidence in your product that you're not going to be anything that's going to tarnish their name. Of course, everyone knows we make the ammo airbrush. We make the Apex airbrush. We make.
You make
those are the probably
you make for Sadar too, right? Sadar.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say those are probably the 2 most known names in the model hobby industry that people possibly use their products. Those come out of our factory here in Chicago. We do make the Sada airbrush. They're of course more in the automotive and industrial field. Their big business is spray guns. We make Snap-on tools. We used to make Mac tools and Matco tools, and they took their business to China. That's one thing we can't compete with. If there's a company whose sole motivation is to get the cheapest product they can, they'll come to us and say, hey, here's what we want. Here's what we can get it for. And we'll tell them, okay, you know what you want. You know where you can get it. go get it because we can't do it for you. So we're very honest about that. So companies like, we used to do the Sears Craftsman airbrush.
Yep.
Thank goodness we didn't do that at the time that they stopped paying people for their stuff. But Sears Craftsman, eventually that went away. But yeah, so we still make Snap-on tools, SATA, ammo, we're about to put out the Reaper Vex airbrush.
Yeah.
Which and you know, one of the things, Gil, for me is in my tenure as the owner administrator of Badger, a lot of great things have happened for me, Badger, and the partner companies we work with through friendships that have developed. You know, you meet someone at a trade show, you hit it off, you develop a connection or a like for each other and a confidence in each other. And that's how, you know, Mig Jimenez and I consider Mig a very good friend. That friendship came through Ian Hamilton, who was a friend of mine first. In the case of they liked our product, and Lee, you know, reached out to me and asked if we would make an airbrush for him, so we did. In the case of the Reaper Vex that's coming, that all came to be because Ed Pugh, one of the principals at Reaper, and I became friends through association at trade shows and stuff. And, you know, and just in the course of screwing around in normal conversation, you know, it came up, hey, maybe you should make an airbrush for us. And that's how the whole Reaper Vex idea got started. So, you know, one of the cool things for me, at least I think so, and I've tried to always conduct Badger business in this type of manner, is I have a saying, Badger doesn't do transactions, we do relationships. So, and that's where working with friends and people that you trust and have a confidence in, because in any good relationship, you're going to have issues that will come up.
Sure.
Maybe there's something wrong with a percentage of airbrushes, or there was a misunderstanding in pricing or something like that. When you're working with people that you care about and have relationships with, you work through those, and that makes business far more rewarding than when you're constantly, you know, in friction over issues, and it's always about, well, I have to win this situation because it's going to cost my company money. Mm-hmm. So when you have a care about the people you're doing business with, you always find ways to work through those things, and they come up in any relationship. Okay. You know, it's very, to me, a good business relationship is a lot like a marriage. And anyone who's been married for any length of time knows that I love my wife, but there's times we have issues and we need to love each other enough to get through them.
There you go.
So that's kind of how we've always worked with our business model, is relationships over transactions.
Can you see the question on the screen there?
You know what? It's tiny.
Okay, it says Joshua Rysdam Designs. He says, what other products does Ken sell that are not airbrush or paint related?
He already knows the answer, Joshua. What are you doing? Trying to make me look bad on camera? Josh was a friend of Badger. Yep. You know what? Bear with me for 1 second. I'm looking for my glasses so I can actually see those little questions on the screen. Shit. I'm not going to find them. You'll have to read the questions to me, Gil. But you know, other products besides airbrushes, of course, by now I think the lion's share of the modeling community knows about Stynylrez primers. Mm-hmm. And of course, they've become the preferred primer by a lot of fine scale modelers. Then you've got, we don't make our compressors. We're just like everyone else. That's an imported item. We do, the one thing I think we do different than what I know some of our competitors do is the compressors that we sell under our brand name, they come to us completely unbranded, plain white boxes, completely unlabeled compressors. We do all the packaging and labeling here. And the reason for that is we put everything through a 16-step test protocol before we'll put the labels on it and stuff. And let me correct, it's actually a 13-step test protocol, but then we make 3 modifications to the unit. So it's a 16-step process. 13 of those steps are testing steps. The other 3 are modifications we make on the compressors. We don't share with anyone what those modifications are, because quite frankly, we're getting our compressors from the same places as the masters and the no names and the Harbor Freight tools. We're very transparent about that. We're not trying to tell people that we have some unique magic building that we make our compressors in, because we don't make our compressors. But we do put them through a very rigorous testing protocol, and we do make modifications to them. The reason we don't share the modifications is we don't ever want those modifications showing up in the competitor's product, because once China becomes aware of something, it's no longer something you can keep from your competitors having access to the same thing. So that is the one thing that is a little bit of a difference in Badger compressors, is the modifications we make and the testing protocol that we put in, that I know is in place because it happens here in this factory. So, so you got compressors, you got primers, and we of course have an abundance of a line of paints. Everything from Model Flex for mostly model railroaders. There's some military colors in there. Model Flex is actually the parent brand, for lack of a better term, for Freak Flex, which is for the fantasy horror modeling community. It's also the parent brand for Miniature, which is our miniatures paint. Also it's the parent brand for Woods and Waters, and trying to think, Marine Model Flex is also another 60 color range. And what I mean by that is Model Flex is a product developed for non-porous substrates, things like styrene and vinyl and resin and metals and stuff like that. The original color range, the Model Flex range itself, has over 200 colors in it. And we've sat with what we consider expert friends in various communities to choose color palettes out of that 200 plus color grouping that's appropriate and relevant to the different segments of modeling. And they provided us assistance in naming colors and choosing the palettes for it. Like Freak Flex, that was David Fisher and Tom Gilliland, who are, you couldn't have 2 better people that would be representative of the model horror fantasy community, naming and choosing your colors. Miniature, we worked with Chung Chow and Les Bursley and Matthew Fontaine. Again, couldn't have 3 more capable people. Marine Model Flex is Kurt Von Damme, who anyone in that community knows who Kurt Von Damme is. He's a museum modeler that's revered and followed by a lot of people in that category. In the case of Model Flex itself, we use the Bowles drift cards as references for the different rail lines that are out there. And then we use FSC for the small 15 group military colors that are there.
Seeing that you you talked about people that had their input, like in your paints and stuff. Do you do the same thing with your airbrushes when you're developing an airbrush?
Sure, absolutely, absolutely. Matter of fact, the Reaper Vex is a good example. The Reaper Vex actually, trying to figure out how to. The way it came to be was this: is first of all, Reaper, Ed's wanted an airbrush for quite some time. And so he had always asked me about it. And all he wanted us to do was just take a Patriot and put the name Reaper on it. And one of the things for Badger is when we're private branding something, we want to give that customer their own unique product, something that someone can't just say, oh, that's just a Badger Patriot, and they can go buy a Badger Patriot because of the fact that they say it's a Badger Patriot with another name on it, so I'm just paying more for the other name. So in any case, So Reaper had been requesting an airbrush for a little bit of time, and I was working with Aaron Lovejoy and Matthew Fontaine, who are two exceptional miniatures artists. And one of the things that I recognized in observing a lot of miniatures artists is that there seems to be two different painting styles in that community, as well as in fine scale modeling, the more I watch it. You have some artists that work in very tiny little sections and build up their finish, doing it little sections at a time. I call those pixel painters. And then you also have artists that do a lot of layering and blending of color to get to their composition finish with it. And they're two very distinct painting styles. For instance, if you ever watch James Wapple paint, which I've had the pleasure of doing at Gen Con for years, and which unfortunately no Gen Con this year, but James is a guy that he throws whatever comes into his head onto the model. And then all of a sudden, like 20 minutes later, he steps back and goes, voila.
Yeah,
and it's like, holy crap. When did that happen? Yeah. So he's a layerer and a blender, and Aaron paints that same way. Matthew Fontaine paints little tiny sections and builds it up. Mm-hmm. And in watching this, I wanted to try to come up with a single airbrush that would take into consideration those two very prominent painting styles. But the thing about it is, if you watch, and again, you got to understand that I've watched Aaron Lovejoy paint at trade shows. I've watched Matthew Fontaine paint at trade shows. I've watched James Wapple paint at trade shows. So I do see that there are occasional times where, despite them being a layerer and a blender or a pixel painter, they move over to the other part of it for certain aspects of what they're doing. And the idea was, is there a way to make an airbrush that when they do that, they oftentimes have to use a different airbrush because airbrushes spray differently based on the nozzle designs. And just playing around with airbrushes here in the factory and, different needle things and in and out of the airbrushes, and working with Jesus, who's our technician, who's a very talented artist. So I have the ability to test just about anything from the perspective of the artist because of Jesus. We were just playing around with stuff, and we're doing a lot of different tip needle combination stuff. And we stumbled essentially on, without changing the tip on an airbrush, just changing needles on an airbrush that would essentially go from a very fine, precise, concise dot line that would enable you to make little fine hairlines, taking one needle out, putting in another needle without changing anything else. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden the airbrush would spray like a very, very fine mist. Not a real wide mist, but a very soft mist. And, we played around with it, and I decided I sent an airbrush to Matthew and to Aaron. And all I did was I sent it with just the mist needle in the airbrush. And I had a presumption of what the response would be to it. And that was that Aaron was going to love it and Matthew was going to hate it, because Aaron paints in layers, blending colors, and the fine mist really serves that purpose exceptionally. Mm-hmm. And Matthew paints in little tiny pixels when he does it, and the fine mist airbrush doesn't really enable that very well. So I thought he'd be frustrated by it, and sure enough, I still have the Facebook Messenger conversation from it where Matthew was like, I can't use this. I need something that sprays like the chrome, which is his airbrush that he uses, that gives me a very, very fine dot. So then I sent him both the second needle for it. And right away, Matthew's response on Messenger was, this is it. This is perfect. I can use this. This is great. And so because, we've been talking to Reaper for a while, we brought to ReaperCon, the last ReaperCon there was, I had given Aaron and Matthew both these guns, and they both had both needles, and they were both impressed by the ability to change back and forth if and when they wanted to, and that one of the needles would serve their primary painting function for them. And so Aaron had the ear of the guys at Reaper, so a little bit of a seed was planted for what I was going to show him at ReaperCon that year. So we brought it out there and we showed it to them, and they did a lot of evaluation of it, a lot of conversation with Aaron, who's one of their go-to artists. And this was something we were going to do at Badger initially. And I said, you know what? This is the unique design thing that I want to give Reaper because of the fact that, first of all, they're very good at marketing product. We've been wanting to do something with them for years. And it was new, unique design idea that gave them a differentiated product from just something in the Badger line. So a lot of people might think, what are you, nuts? You got this unique airbrush design idea and you're going to go and give it to someone else. And well, you know, I'm confident and I trust in my relationship with Reaper that they're not going to go and get into making these airbrushes themselves or having them made somewhere else. And I'm still creating access to this very unique, cool product design. I'm just not doing it through the Badger name. I'm doing it through the Reaper name. So they have their unique product that I want to give them. And I have, we've designed a product that is useful to the market, serves a purpose. And, you know, we have a lot of people asking us, you know, when's the Reaper Vex coming out? Which actually, if you saw the live feed 2 weeks ago, you saw all of the Reaper bodies because they have, I think, 800 on the initial order of it. And those guns are all at the laser engravers right now. So we're getting a lot of people asking about it. The one thing that we do hope people realize is they won't be able to get that product from Badger.
They have to go to Reaper.
They have to go to Reaper to get it. It'll be a Badger-made product. And, you know, the people that we make airbrushes for, neither of us hide the fact that it's a Badger-made product. Right. They actually genuinely feel that making it known that Badger makes it gives it a credibility and an appeal to the customers who would buy it from them. Of course, we're happy about that. But we also, because we do something unique for them, we believe we're protecting them in terms of, you know, you can't just come to Badger and buy an ammo Air Viper, Air Coat. We won't sell it to you.
Right.
Same thing's going to happen with the Reaper Vex. I'm sure we'll get people asking us, you know, what parts are that and what can I do? And we won't tell them because that's something we've done for Reaper. And we want them to be protected, that the design we're giving them that's unique to them is kept unique to them.
Yeah. Now the same thing happened with the high roller trigger. That was artist inspired. Am I correct?
Absolutely. I've mentioned the name Ashley Brayson a lot of times. A few years back, I used to annually go over to England for a show called Custom Culture Blast Off. Which was a cool little event, and Badger was a sponsor of it, and we had a nice space allotment there, and it gave me the ability to finally meet in person a lot of the UK artists that I had become friends with, even though I'd never met them in person. And one of those people was an artist by the name of Ashley Brayson, who is an absolutely exceptional artist. He paints wallets. A couple weeks back on Lazy on a Sunday afternoon, he was our feature artist. So people got to see some of the wallets that he paints. And one thing about Ashley is he would always send me pictures of stuff that he was painting. Every time he sent me a picture, he'd have a picture of the Sotar airbrush that he uses. So that way, when I post the picture, you know, I've got a product in the photograph as well. But I noticed in every picture on the top of the trigger, he had this little cork pad with a leather top on it that he had glued onto the cork, and the cork was affixed to the trigger. And finally, one time I asked him, I said, "Hey, what's with the additional stuff on top of the trigger?" So he explained it to me that he felt that gave him more control because he does very intricate detail. He does portraits and stuff.
Yeah, I've seen his work. It's gorgeous.
Well, so you can realize the scale and the complex detail and intricacy of what he does. But he felt that higher trigger gave him better control with the trigger from a leverage standpoint and a responsiveness standpoint. So I asked him, I said, would you send me one of these triggers? So he sent me a jetpack of 3 of them and played around with it. And we measured it up and everything. And I asked him, I said, would you mind if we use this as a model for doing a taller trigger? Because, based on the reason you do it and what you do with it, there's probably other people who would also see a benefit to this and like to use this. So he gave us permission to do that. And that's how the high roller trigger came to be, was through the interaction with Ashley on that. And it's actually something that a lot of people now, any Badger airbrush they buy, they'll buy a high roller trigger to put in it, because the high roller trigger actually comes as a standard only on the extremes. Doesn't come on any other airbrushes. So, but yeah, I mean, one of the things, Gilbert, is that, I mean, we try to listen to the community that is using our product, because if there's ways it can be made better, they're going to be the ones to tell us that.
Exactly.
So, and listen, you can't do everything that you hear, and some things are so unique to the person who's doing it that, you realize right away, well, okay, that might make sense for you, but I think that's going to be a little bit difficult for a large group of people to wrap their head around, as far as something that they want to do modification-wise. And the other part of it is you can only do so much. I have seen in my tenure here ideas for probably a good 60 different ways to do nozzle tips and stuff like that. And the fact of the matter is you can't do them all. It's not feasible from a manufacturing standpoint. And, the people who do the modifications to serve their personal preferences, the people who would want to do those same things probably have the ability to do the same things. And unless, for us as a rule, unless there's a potential to sell probably a good 10,000 pieces over a 10-year period, we're probably not going to be able to do it, because at the end of the day, as much as we want to do everything people would like to have done for them personally, from a manufacturing model, it's just not efficient to do it. Sometimes you got to say no.
That it kind of bleeds into a question here that I was going to wait for a little later, but
what's the question on there right now, Gil?
There's one here. Where did it go? Okay, right here. It says, this is from Dennis Scott. He says, "Hi, Gil and Ken. Gil, I was wondering if you have heard of Eden's Edge, which is Ryan Townsend. I've heard of him. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's out of Florida. And he says he's got a gold-plated Iwata. And he says, my question is, if I were to send mine off, would it cause problems?" Now, I don't know if he's talking about an Iwata or a Badger. But I know that I think it's Coast Airbrush that'll do that. That'll replate whatever colors and stuff. That's not something that you want to deal with. Is stuff like that on a one-to-one basis, is it?
That's well, we just did gold-plated Sotars.
But I'm talking about like just specific, like one. Somebody sends it in and you gotta manage.
Yeah, no, it's to do that, you're getting into stripping finishes and replating it. It's very costly doing those one at a time.
Yeah, because so I don't know if you remember, but it was about 3 years ago when you were showing I believe it was the Extreme, and it was just just an unplated version.
Yeah.
And I walked up to it and I said, "Man, I love that finish." And then you turned around and told me, he says, "Yeah, I'll just get one silver plated with some turquoise on it for you." So Mike from NY3D Creations, he busted my chops here a little bit. He says, "Hey guys, Gil, Ken, my question is for later, but he says I want to ask Ken if he can make me a silver plated airbrush with turquoise accents for my personal use. So basically, he's busting my shit here, you know.
No, I can't make it for you, but Gilbert probably can.
Well, see, that's the other thing. I was telling people, like, I know that you do batches of airbrushes. You have to send them out to get laser engraved, but some of the stuff you do in-house, right? Am I correct?
Right. Yeah.
So if somebody wanted to say, I don't know, say me, and for the Styrene Syndicate, I wanted to get a batch of airbrushes made. Like, say I wanted to get a batch of Sotars made with Styrene Syndicate on it. What would be, I don't know if you want to say this, but the minimum amount? Because, of course, you're a business. You know, this stuff costs money. So,
yeah. Well, in answer to that, Gilbert, small cup airbrushes we make in batches of 100. Large cup airbrushes we make in batches of 50.
Mm-hmm.
Bottom feed airbrushes we make in batches of 100. The reason for that is the boards that we use to move the airbrushes through production. That's what can be held on each board. A large cup airbrush takes up the space of 2 rows, where a small cup and a bottom feed take up 1 row. So we've always kind of used that for, the requirements we have to do something custom.
Okay, so it would be the batch depending on the cup size.
Yeah, so large cups, 50 of them, small cups, 100 of them. And the reason for that is that it's very difficult from a manufacturing efficiency standpoint to break your patterns. You know, where they're making 100 airbrushes at a time, to go to them and say, you know what, these 20, take them out and do this to them. That becomes very inefficient, and it also leads to screw ups, where someone may inadvertently hear something different than what they were instructed, or lose the note, the memo that was given to do the modification, and you end up with 30 instead of 20, or you end up with 10 instead of 20. So as long as we do it in full batches, we're always okay with that. We've done some of that. I'm trying to think, who's the guy, New England Hobby World or something like that?
Yes.
Yeah, we did some guns for him, like that. So yeah, I mean, we're open to that. The thing about it is, we do have our own engraving machine here for simple stuff. That's always a lot easier, and that's all we offer in the way of custom stuff. We don't send out for laser engraving unless it's something like, ammo. Ammo they buy thousands of airbrushes from us. So laser engraving that, not a big deal.
Right.
We're not going to send 100 brushes for laser engraving for a one-time shot type thing. But it's equally gratifying to have your name put on an airbrush in the simple engraving we can do on the engraving machine here. We also do that. There are instances we break our rules, but I'm the only one who can break them. Where, for instance, we just did, we're doing 5 airbrushes for the winners of the WantaFest model contest. So in that instance, we're only going to engrave 5 guns, WantaFest 2020, winners. And we'll do that. We do that for clubs and stuff like that ask us for prize donations and stuff. So we'll do smaller quantities. But we don't ever want to get into Joe Smith saying, hey, can I get an airbrush with my name on it? It is something we've contemplated, but the reality of it is it's not efficient to do. So.
Now I want to get into a product here and I'm going to go a little backstory, because I've told this story to people before. Stynylrez has been around, 4 or 5 years?
About 5 years now.
And I remember, I believe it was at Adepticon about 5 years ago. You had your table there. Wasn't that Schaumburg, the other place that they had it at?
Yeah, Lombard.
Yeah, and I remember you selling it there. And my friend Baltazar and I walked up, and we were talking.
How's he doing?
Yeah, he's doing pretty good. He's into the biking scene, motorcycles now. So you rarely hear from him because he's out on the road but he's
great day for it today.
So I remember bringing it home, and I remember telling you, said, this is going to be it's great, blah. And I said, man, that's a bold statement, brother. That's a bold statement. But I remember bringing it home that night. And I have a video. I mean, I didn't go into like what Balthazar did was he took 6 or 7 different primers. And over the course of 2 videos, he shot, like panels and showed just how good this stuff was. And I remember sitting there spraying it, and I'm watching it. I hit it with a heat gun, and I'm watching this stuff just, and I'm like, holy shit, this stuff is good. Let it sit overnight, and I went to scratch it, and it wouldn't move. And I'm like, holy shit. And I was singing the praises from that moment on. What inspired that primer?
What inspired that primer?
That primer is got to be the best base acrylic primer on the market today, bar none.
Yeah. Here's what inspired it. We came out with Minotaur paint. And this story might get a little bit lengthy. I'm friends with Chung Chow, who had a YouTube channel, the WG Consortium.
War Gamers Consortium. Yeah.
And one of the producers on it was Les Bursley, who's an exceptional miniatures artist. And these guys came to me and said, hey, we use your airbrushes, and we're wondering if you want to do some type of sponsorship thing for us, which is a requirement that we have. A lot of people don't realize, because I get people all the time asking me, to sponsor them. Yeah. Hey, I'm using Iwata, but if you give me an airbrush, I'll talk about it. One of the requirements we have to even consider anyone for sponsorship, you have to be using our airbrush to begin with, which we don't do a lot of sponsorships anymore. It's too hard to, because you got to say no more than you say yes. Otherwise, you're giving away more than you're selling. But one of the requirements was always that you had to be a Badger user before we'd even consider you. If you're using Iwata, you need to be asking them for the sponsorship, not us. And I shouldn't just say Iwata, because we get it with other brands as well. But in any case, so these guys came to us, and I really had very little idea. We had very little presence in the wargaming market, and I had very little idea of what the WG Consortium was and stuff. And so I checked it out to the extent possible and said, you know what? What's the harm? I'll send these guys a couple airbrushes. So we sent them a couple airbrushes, and all of a sudden, about 3 weeks after we had sent them these airbrushes, we start getting all of these calls and contacts from dealers in the wargaming market, asking if they could set up dealerships. And we start getting all these inquiries from miniatures artists about buying Badger airbrushes. Well, WG Consortium they were influencers. Yes, they started doing these videos and mentioning us in them, and it took off like crazy. And the next thing we knew, WG Consortium, if you're familiar with what it was a relatively large group of producers, probably at the time about 20 different producers all brought into this one channel. So we started watching the WG Consortium channel and the producers, and I'm watching all of these videos and seeing the result of what had happened with the airbrushes. I talked to Les and Chung, and Matthew Fontaine was another person who we had started working with, although he wasn't part of the consortium. And I told them, you guys have made a big difference for us in this community. And I'm wondering if you want to help us develop a paint line specifically for miniatures artists and wargamers. I have this Model Flex range with more than 200 colors, and I think it'd be nice if we had like an 80 color palette for the miniatures artist. And they graciously assisted us in that. I can remember the 3 of them, Matthew remotely, Chung and Les here in our conference room, because they were here for I think it was Gamers Day or something that Warhammer used to put on over here in Rosemont. And they came in and they went through all of these colors and they selected the 80 color palette, and Minotaur was born. And Minotaur had the same response as what happened when Les and Chung and the other consortium guys started doing all these videos with the airbrushes, and Minotaur just took off like a house of fire. Mm-hmm. So I'm watching all of these videos now with people using Badger airbrushes and Minotaur paint, and in every video, almost every video, 99% of them, there's always a bottle of Vallejo primer sitting there.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, that's all I could focus on was this bottle of Vallejo primer. So I went back to Les and Chung, and I said, hey, guys, I really need your help developing a primer because I love all these videos, except that there's a bottle of Vallejo primer. Not that I have anything against Vallejo. I know Alex. I know his mom. I've met them. They seem to be good, genuine people. But at the end of the day, not much money going in my pocket because Vallejo primer is being used. So what we did, I asked them what they were using, and of course they said Vallejo. So we started looking at the Vallejo product, and I asked them, what do you like? What don't you like about it? And quite frankly, Gil, no offense to Vallejo, the response was,
I know where you're going. I know where you're going.
That's all that's available was kind of the response. It was what people had access to. So that's what they used. Quite frankly, they weren't overly excited about using Vallejo. It's just that that's all they could get.
Yes.
So I had acquired bottles of the Vallejo primers and sent it to our chemist, and it pretty much turned into nothing more than a color reference because all of the things like, we would run it through the protocol things that they wanted a primer to do, and unfortunately, it wasn't a really good gauge for how it should do it. Mm-hmm. And it had shortcomings.
Yes.
And our chemist, really put his mind to, instead of what does the Vallejo primer do, what do these guys want the primer to do? Mm-hmm. And he, taking that into consideration, started developing different formulas for the Stynylrez primer. And initially, we were only doing 3 colors, white, black, and gray. That was it, because we were told by Les and Chung and Matthew that's really all we need. That's all everyone primes in is white, black, and gray. Mm-hmm. And the only thing after the initial formula was developed, we sent samples to them. The only thing that changed from the initial samples was the tone of the gray. The chemist on the first shot just nailed it. That's still the formulation for Stynylrez now. Mm-hmm. And all that was done was there was a change. The gray was darkened from what the initial gray was to bring it more central between the white and the black. And that's how Stynylrez came to be. So the motivation for Stynylrez was a lot of people shooting videos with bottles of Vallejo primer being the only non-Badger product in the video. And of course, anyone who's used it has loved using it.
Now, here's another question. Are you surprised at how well it was received and how it's taken off?
Well, now having a better understanding for what modelers and miniatures artists want a primer to do, which I didn't have at the time because I'm not an artist, I'm not a painter. Knowing what I now know, I'm not surprised because everything they wanted to do, it does. Mm-hmm. It's something that when you get an affirmation from the people that you're trying to make something for, that you've nailed it, you feel good about it. And when you realize that there's the benefit of going to the community,
yes,
to find out what they want in the product before you do the product. So that was basically it. I mean, if we had just gone and gotten bottles of Vallejo primer,
I think we lost them.
I'm still here.
Hold on, you'll be back in a sec. There you are. You there?
Okay. I was just saying, if we had just gone and gotten bottles of Vallejo primer and use that as the standard, our primer may have not been any different than Vallejo primer. But because we not only acquired what the market was using and had access to, but also got the input of very reliable representatives of the community, we were enabled to create something better than what they already had for them. And I've since had the experience of, because when you hear stuff like that and you learn something new, you become curious about it. I now know what they mean when they want to sand the model and have the primer adhere to it instead of just kind of peel right off with it. I can understand that now, what that means, and that is one of the notable differences. I'm not looking to knock my competitor, but I know that our primer, it works. Fine scale modelers are doing everything in a scaled down version of real life. Mm-hmm. Our primers do in that scaled down version of real life. They act and function the same way as they do in auto body shops and in paint shops and in full scale versions of what our miniature scale world is. Mm-hmm. So that's something. And of course, our primers are made down in Texas, and then we ship them up here and do the bottling here in our factory. But every bucket, as it gets opened, a certain amount of it comes out, goes to spray. We have just tons of box cars here. Mm-hmm. Spray a box car, let it dry overnight, run it through a scratch testing, a sand testing, let it sit again for another 24 hours and run it through the same test, and then they get the okay to bottle on it, presuming that it passes all that.
The only, and it's a minor knock. I hear people, well, I have a hard time cleaning it out of my airbrush. And then I showed them, give me a second here. This.
Yep. If you use that and you follow that direction, you'll have no problem with it.
Yeah. So that was born from, the people, to clean out just about anything out of your airbrush. It's not. Yeah. I tell people all the time, you can't clean lacquers with it. It's not going to do all that, but for the vast majority of what we do, it'll clean it. It'll do real well. Now, there are some people that make their own, and most of the guys watching, they know that. But I use this stuff too. I love it. I love it. It'll clean it.
And the real key with this, I have my bottle too. Your bottle's bigger, which is the only thing that you have that's bigger than stuff in the mouth. But the key to it is really to follow the very simple instruction that's on the bottle. Mm. So, if you do that, cleaning your airbrush becomes relatively simple. Too many people wait too long to shoot the cleaner through their gun.
Now I hear a lot of the white. They always have a problem with the white. Every now and then I do, but not. It depends on the needle size too of what you're using. I see a lot of people try to shoot it through a Sotar at 20 Oh, white. I mean, anybody that's painted knows white is a pain in the ass to shoot to begin with.
Yeah, not just in Stynylrez, in any paint, because white has a more robust pigmentation to it.
Yeah, and so I tell them all, well, it's no good. Oh no, it's good. It's just you need a bigger needle and a higher pressure to shoot it. It'll shoot. It'll work. So, and then the other colors, they came afterwards from a need.
Well, that's because the miniatures market and the military market have a lot of crossover between them. And of course, as you had people making a conversion from Vallejo to Stynylrez, of course, Vallejo in their range has numerous primer colors. Mm-hmm. And as the military guys who are also part of the miniatures community became aware of Stynylrez, it pretty quickly became a common request. Are you going to do colors like Vallejo has colors? Initially, we said no because, we were told by the people we relied on the expertise of that we only needed white, black, and gray, and that was enough for us at the time. But the questions remained persistent for us to do additional colors. So We did decide to do the olive green, the red brown, and the original color was neutral yellow. It's now neutral, which were what we were told were three of the more popular tones for the military community. And we said at that point that that's it. Okay, there's going to be 6 colors, and that's it. And lo and behold, once we did that, it just opened a whole nother can of questions of, are you going to do more colors than just these 6? You know, we need this, this, and that. The second 6 colors actually came to be. We knew we were going to do a light flesh if we were going to do more colors. We just figured because so many guys painting miniatures use flesh tones, and they like to, you know, the whole reason in the colored primers is using your primer as a base color. So we did light flesh, and of course, I'm very good friends with George Stevenson of Black Art Models, which is just an exceptional range of different horror monster kits and stuff. And I vaguely remember telling George we were doing light flesh, and George, of course, is black, and he looked at me and said, "Are you doing black flesh?" And I said, "I am now." So we did ebony flesh, and then the other colors we did a survey monkey for, and was quite surprised. The most popular next color requested was dull pink, and that's how dull pink came to be. That apparently is popular with automotive guys that paint yellows and oranges.
Yes.
They like to use dull pink as a base for that. And then we had oceanic blue, which seemed to be mostly marine modelers and aircraft guys like that tone of blue for it. Then we had a lot of requests for black gloss, which was the 6th color. Again, I think that went to the automotive guys more so than anything else. And then metal. For also automotive guys that paint candy finishes, they wanted a metal primer. So that's how those came to be. And the metal was so popular that when we did the next and last group of 6, we did 3 more metallic tones, bronze, copper, gold. We, along the line somewhere, changed neutral yellow to just a neutral color, took the yellow tone out of it, it's currently a very beige khaki type color, and we got some bite back on that, so we reintroduced neutral yellow as pale mustard, and we had changed red brown as well and got some bounce back on that, so we reintroduced the original red brown as terracotta, and then the one color in between is pale sage, which is a very light greenish olivish color. So yeah, that's kind of the whole history of Stynylrez in 4 minutes and I'm sorry, 5 minutes and 3 seconds.
No, it's because every time I talk to people, you know, they ask me a couple of questions, you know, because I usually tell them, look, they tell me, well, why a Badger, Gil? Why you? I have Iwatas, I have Harder and Steenbecks, you know, I've got a couple of Grecs. I got a shitload of you know, different Badgers, but the whole thing is, I started on a Badger back in 1984, doing T-shirts. You know, it was
I might have put that together for you, Gilbert.
What's that?
I might have put that airbrush together for you back in 1984.
It came. Remember the wooden box? You had the wooden box and all that. We got
model 150.
You know where Ford City is, right? Right there in Chicago. Ford City.
Sure. 75th and Cicero.
My wife and I were walking through there. My daughter was just a baby, about 2 years old, a year old maybe. And she saw a guy doing T-shirts, you know, with an airbrush. And I went to buy one for my daughter. I wanted one, you know, with her name on it, you know, a little bib, you know, with her name on it. And my wife says, "You're not buying that." I'm like, "Well, why not?" She goes, "Because you can do it." I said, "Yeah, but I don't have airbrush." I'd never used an airbrush before. So there was over on Southwest Highway, right there in Palis, there was an Ace Hardware store that sold them. So she bought me one. You know, I mean, we were dirt. We had nothing, man. And, you know, she picked it up. And, man, for a couple of weeks, I just sat there, you know. Remember the old magazines? I'm going through magazines, figuring it out, you know. Drove me nuts. But I learned how to use one. I've been using one, and I still have it. I have 2 of them she bought me in 84, and I got a 200 that she bought me in 85. And I still have them, and they work beautifully. As a matter of fact, I brought them in. It had to be about 6 years ago. I stopped over there. You weren't there because I asked to see it. You weren't there. And I stopped, and Jesus came out. I think it was about 5 years ago. Jesus come out, and I showed him the airbrushes. And I said, I just need, make sure that they're all good, all tuned up. He took them apart. He says, no, they're perfect. He just changed the seals on them. That was it. I mean, they're beautiful airbrushes. I still use them today. Great airbrushes. I mean, they stay beautiful. Beautiful airbrushes.
Well, I always answer that, Gil, with you can't put a lifetime warranty on your product if you don't intend for it to last a lifetime.
Well, yeah. And, the funny part is because when I showed up there, my license plates, my wife's plate says Badger 1 on there. So
I remember that.
Yeah. And they're like, who's that? Whose car is that? I said, mine. And Jesus says, why does it say Badger? Oh, it's because that's what I call my wife because she's a little fierce little thing. So we call her a little Badger. And that's how that came. But anyway, that airbrush to this day, I've had people, my wife says, why do you still have that? Yeah. Still use it all the time. Love it. I love that airbrush. That and the 200. Love it. Love that airbrush. And she went and got me a Micron, an Iwata Micron. And I had, I already had the Sotar. And I'm like, honey, I didn't need that, but thank you. She gave it to me for Father's Day, and I used it. I used it twice.
Yeah.
Twice. I mean, it's a beautiful airbrush. I love it.
Yeah. It's for what you do, though. It's more airbrush than you need.
Exactly.
You're absolutely right. I mean, the custom Micron for illustration and photo retouching and stuff, it creates such a beautiful atomization, but at the same time, it's a little bit difficult for putting fine scale modeling media through it. It's really, it does it, but it's not what it's really designed to be used for. Yeah. In their product line, I think for the fine scale modeler, the Eclipses are probably their most versatile airbrush. It's like in our range, the Pro Production series, the Patriots are the most versatile of the airbrushes. And yeah, we in Iwata, to me, have the most complete ranges of product. To me, Hodder and Steenbeck excels at micro detailing airbrushes, and they kind of have a void when it comes to the general detail stuff. In the case of Pache, it's the opposite. They have good general detail guns, but they seem to come up a little bit short when you get to the micro detail category. In Iwata and Badger, you have a very complete range, where they go Micron and we go Sotar, they go Eclipse, we go Pro Production series airbrushes. There's really not a void in those brands. And quite frankly, there are so many good airbrushes on the market right now. To me, an artist, if he's not open to finding out if he's not open and budget capable of finding out what these different tools can do, he might be missing something that he thinks doesn't exist that he might be looking for in a product. And, each airbrush is going to act and work a little bit differently. That's why in our range, I mean, we've got Legend series, we've got Pro Production series, we've got Renegades, we got Vegas, we got Omnis. It's not just a matter, and the same thing with Iwata. They have the Plus series, they have the Micron, they have the Eclipse, they have the Neo, but I don't, that's not their shining moment product. But we have those various guns because they will do different things to meet the different needs that different airbrush users have. And the whole world isn't fine scale model.
Right.
You got cake decorating, you got taxidermy, you have custom car painting, you got fingernails, you got cosmetic applications. So that's why that exists, that there's so many different airbrushes. All I tell people is, look at reputable brands. With Iwata, you got a company that'll stand behind their product. Same with Pache, same with Hodder Steenbeck, same with Badger. And if your budget allows for it, realize that each of those guns will do something different. I get people a lot of times, I'm using Iwata Eclipse, why would I buy a Badger? And I'll ask them, well, is there anything that the Eclipse isn't doing for you that you wish it did? Because maybe something in a Badger range will do that. And that's why you look into those things and you consider
I've heard
those
you
things.
tell people that like at Adepticon, they'll come up and
Absolutely.
they'll ask. You're probably the. Do you remember the old what was that show? Oh Jesus, they used to have the industry. Oh man, I can't think of the name of it right now. They moved it to New Jersey and then it fell apart. It didn't.
The iHobby show, the Richter show.
And I remember the Grex guys being there, you being there, the Iwata guys being there. And Baltazar and I would walk around because we used to, I helped them 1 year on the make and take. But anyway, when you're talking to them, no, this is the airbrush you need. I'm not talking specific, but certain people would say, this is the one you need. And I said, well, what about that one? Well, no, this one is the one you need. You're the only one I've ever heard say, if it's working for you, why do you need mine?
But that's reality. I've never been big on asking people to spend money they don't need to spend.
But see,
probably in the next sentence, I probably said, "Hey, check out my paint."
Exactly. But see, that tells a lot about the character of the person running that company.
It tells a lot about the character of the company.
Right.
That's how my dad was when he started it. That's how I am now. That's how Badger's built to be. We're honest. We have integrity. We respect our reputable competitors. So it's just a way we are. We have our shortcomings. Our customer service lately has been slow in responding. That's on me because I'm the one who does a lot of that stuff. But at the same time, we'll always do the best we can in any regard we can, whether it's a product advisement, a competitor assessment. It doesn't do any good to mislead or deceive anybody just so you can sell something to them, because if that's your motivation in doing it, it's probably going to come back to bite you.
Yeah.
And if you're honest about it, I think people appreciate that, they respect that, they acknowledge that. And when you're giving them good guidance and they end up realizing that the guidance you gave them was good, honest advice, they return to you next time they need that. They're in that same position to look for help with something related to what they're doing. So that's just the way we operate. So
there's a question.
There's a question up there. Yeah. I'm sorry, I can't read any of the questions, or it's way too small on my phone.
I got it. Roger Honing asks, Ken, is there a chance you'll do anything like the FOTL series again in the future?
The crazy thing about that, I got to tell you, Roger, we had all kinds of plans this year to do a lot of 2020 stuff because, of course, we're in the year 2020, and we, of course, have the SOTAR 2020 airbrush. We still have plans to do some of it. It's been reeled in a lot simply because things have happened so gradual and slowly, simply because of some of the unusual circumstances around us this year. But I do foresee by the end of the year, we'll have some other special things that we're going to do. There will 99.9% certain before the end of the year, there will be another gold-plated SOTAR available. It's just a matter of we have things that we still have to get done that should have been done by now that aren't done yet. Mm-hmm. For instance, I did anticipate and hope that by about this time, mid-June, we would be done with Happy Birthday. Well, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Well, when you have 25 to 30% of your workforce not here because they've chosen to stay home when given that choice, because they're more comfortable there under some of the unusual circumstances going on. Well, those are resources that slow you down. And I'm not going to I can't bring other people in to replace them because, when all is said and done, I'm hopeful all those people who I consider family to return here and have their jobs ready and waiting for them. We've also had issues where we're not the only ones that's happening to. We have, as we talked about earlier, we get our turn parts and our supplies from people outside of here. Mm-hmm. Those companies have also had circumstances. I've had at least 2 vendors that had to go through 2-week shutdowns because someone at their company had the
COVID.
contracted COVID-19. So they were shut down. So that was 2 weeks that, we weren't able to get anything from them. One of those people, unfortunately, was our laser engraver. And we had guns over there already, hundreds of them. And for 2 weeks, we couldn't get them back because of the fact, first of all, they weren't done, but, there was simply nothing going on over there. So 2020 has been an extremely unique year between COVID-19 and some of the other stuff that's gone on.
And here's the other thing: a lot of people don't realize you're not a big shop. You're a small.
No, we're not. I think because we're global, a lot of people think we're a lot bigger than we are. But we're not. We are a relatively small company. We're about 30 employees.
And those are all generational, right? You've had people there that their mothers worked there, their fathers worked there.
Oh, God, yeah. Well, it's kind of funny because I've got 5 people from one family that work here. And we were just talking this week about vacations, and I told them they can't all go on vacation together because I'll lose additional workforce as a result of it. But in any case, yeah. So it's been kind of a crazy year. Listen, you and I have been around for a long time. I don't think we'll ever remember or have another year like this one has been.
Yeah, it's been something else.
The stuff that's going on, But the cool, one of the cool things, just a couple weeks ago, our neighbors at the house, their daughter turned, I think, 18, and you couldn't have a normal birthday party with it. There were literally, through where I live, we live in a cul-de-sac, and there were literally probably in excess of 120 cars that did a parade by her house. And she'll never forget that. That'll be the coolest birthday she's ever had. So there has been some good to come out of all of this unfortunate circumstance that we've experienced, because I think we've learned to do things differently and appreciate things that we should value higher.
Yes.
Far more in the manner that we should value them.
Now, I've got a comment here from Mike at NY3D Creations. He says, I want to thank you, Ken, American manufacturing and the process and effort of keeping his products made in the U.S. by U.S. vendors and not taking the easy road of using the cheap foreign stuff. So that's
you're welcome.
Yeah. I hear a lot of that. When I tell them, they're like, oh, they get their stuff. No, they don't. No, that's an American-made product. It's
absolutely not. Yeah. We import 3 items of note: our compressors, our airbrush holders. We actually import those from Italy because we do product exchange with Amati, who's our distributor in Italy. So they make a cool airbrush holder, so we trade them product for them. And then the other item of significance, we do import our paint mixers in from China. Pretty much everything else of substance is made here in the United States.
Here's another one from Sim Racer Flight Sim. He says, hi, Ken, with the new Patriot 105 having the packing seal screwed in now rather than pushing like the previous 105. And I think you touched on this. Do you sell the tool for removing and putting the packing seal in?
Actually, with the new design, you don't need a tool. It's a simple, small screwdriver, kind of like a little bit larger than an eyeglass screwdriver in through the back of the body. You insert it, you'll turn it and feel it slip into the groove, and then you turn it out. Once you turn it out till it falls from the airbrush, you can take the seal out and put a new seal in. So there's really not a tool involved with it any longer. And what you do is, when you put it back in, you can set that seal by tightening and loosening the screw as you reinsert it into the airbrush.
Now,
that's something that's one of the things that we're going to in pretty much all of our airbrushes now is field changeable and adjustable inner seals, because one of the things that we have more noticeably had to address in recent years is that for people outside the United States to take advantage of our lifetime warranty on that inner seal, it's a hassle to send your airbrush from Australia, to the United States. And unfortunately, there was a day and time where our distributors throughout the world also did a very good job of providing service for our product, and they could do those seal changes. Unfortunately, they don't really function that way anymore, because in most cases, those operations have become so large to have a dedicated on-staff person who can do things like needle bearing changes. It's not reasonable for us to expect them to have that to serve as that type of service center for our product. So slowly but surely, all of our airbrushes are moving to field changeable, adjustable seals. And that's actually something that, to their credit, our competitors have had that for quite some time.
Now, for the people in the UK, you have Barwell's, and they do sell parts there for your.
Yes, absolutely. That's one thing. Our best distributors in places like Holland and in Australia and Germany and England and other places. I'm leaving countries out. Finding parts is not as difficult as finding service for it. So, it's one of those things that the dealers and distributors who provide the replacement parts certainly benefit from doing that. Okay. And listen, we have thousands of different parts. We don't expect every dealer and distributor to carry every part, right, but certainly they're wise to carry the parts relevant to the airbrushes they're carrying. At the very least, the commonly necessary parts, tips, needles, stuff like that. There's some parts that you'll have your airbrush. I mean, your 150, you've probably never changed the tube shank in it.
Never.
You've probably changed tips and needles in it.
Yes.
For all I know, it might still have the original trigger in it.
It does.
Unless you did something to drop it and damage it. Yeah. So, there's no doubt that with airbrushes, some parts are more commonly necessary than others.
I'll be honest, it's probably one of them's probably still has the original needle in there and nozzle.
Yeah, and that's possible too if you take care of your stuff. To me, the most damage that happens with airbrushes happens when either someone's been remiss about cleaning it and may have even left color sitting in it for a very long period of time, or they drop it.
Yeah.
That's where your damage occurs most frequently, is when you drop it, because the law of airbrush is if you drop your airbrush, it's going to land on the nose. So that's where your greatest damage is going to occur. And if it doesn't land on the nose, it lands on the trigger. And then the trigger gets bent in it. So
now, one of the last things I want to ask, and I know we've talked about this. I remember sitting down at lunch with you, James and I, and we were talking about this, and you basically told me to shut up, and in a funny way, in a good way. Product wise, that hat, have you ever thought of believe it or not, I get asked this a lot. Hey, does he sell that kind of stuff? No, I don't know. No, those what you see on him, because I know the backstory. Those are from when he was playing, the baseball days, or those are old. He doesn't sell that kind of stuff. But did you ever think about doing something like that?
Yeah, we think about it all the time. But my answer to that is Badger is steak. So we don't sell sizzle. We sell steak. And all that fringe stuff, and listen, there are probably hundreds of people that would, gladly decorate themselves with something Badger. And I appreciate that. I love people for that. But, every time I consider it something more important or seemingly more important, takes precedence over doing that. Gotcha. We've never had a budget for it. I don't know. It's a question that comes up frequently. My answer to it is we're steak. We're not sizzle. So
not even
trust me, one day when we do it, everyone will know about it. And if we don't sell a shit ton of it, I'll be really pissed off. Trust me. this jersey, everybody should want one. These are badass. These are legitimate pro quality jerseys. One thing about the Badgers baseball team, we were good. We won Amateur World Series. This was a team. We traveled to Hawaii, Canada. We played teams from Alaska, Japan, all over the place. Played in California. We were a quality operation. A lot of very talented players played ball for Badgers baseball.
Oh.
A lot of guys that went on to have pro careers or were retiring from pro careers. If you want something, that's what you should want is a Badgers baseball jersey because they're badass. And that's what this hat is. This is one of the I got to tell you, Gil, the Badgers baseball team was probably I ran Badgers baseball from the time I was 19 until the year my first daughter was born, and she's 26 now. And that time in my life was some of the most fun I could ever have, not related to this business, other than the name and the sponsorship of the company, because we used to drink a lot of beer. We used to play a lot of hacky sack. We used to have a lot of stories from the road. And it's one of those things that it was a cool thing to do. And maybe one day I will get a bunch of Badger jerseys made. We probably had 20 different hats over the time we had it. But yeah, so one day we might do something basic and simple in a T-shirt or something. And we've talked about even on Lazy on a Sunday afternoon. One of the things that we're blessed with is Jesus, who's a very talented artist as well.
I was going to get into that go ahead.
And I'm sitting here looking off to my left, and I see stacks of hats that are airbrushed with Badger logos on them. That one day we'll probably just put them in the thrift store and sell them on there. And we'll probably put a post on Facebook if you want some Badger bling. Here it is. Because the other thing I get, Gilbert, is there's probably a good 20 people that recurringly hound me to do banners to send people to put in the backgrounds.
I know I have, and you just told me, okay.
But here's the funny thing about that, Gilbert. I appreciate that. I don't want to seem disrespectful at all. But I can send you a logo and you can print it out on a piece of paper and laminate it and stick it on the wall behind you.
Yeah.
And that's so much simpler than me trying to order in a bunch of banners that I don't have any budget for.
Exactly.
So in any case, it's one of the weird things about us. We've never been into that stuff, and trust me, I can still remember. I had brought my daughter up to a trade show in Milwaukee, an event called Train Fest, and Iwata. All the guys in their booth, they had on these black button-down shirts that said Iwata on the back of it with a yellow trim on it. And I'll never forget my daughter, who at the time I think might have been like 12, 13 years old. And she goes to me, she says, "Dad, how come you guys don't have a bowling team?" So it's one of those things that's not our thing. No disrespect. I don't mean any disrespect to Iwata in that. But that's their thing. They do bling. We do airbrushes. That's where we put our focus and our energy. And that may be an ignorant position, but it's my position. So,
well, Ken, I want
you know what, Gil? I'll license you to sell Badger bling.
It's not in my budget either. Ken, I want to really thank you. You're a good friend to me. You've always been a good friend to me, and I appreciate you doing this today. Taking time out of your day today and talking to us. Hey, look, I love your airbrushes. There's no secret about it. I tell everybody that, and to the point where some people actually think I work for you. And I'm like, it's just I love the product. I've always loved it. It was the first airbrush I learned how to airbrush with those many years ago, and I always kept coming back to it. It didn't matter what other brands I was buying. I always kept coming back to my Badger because it felt comfortable in my hand. You know what I mean? It's something I got used to using. So I just want to thank you for that. I mean, thank you for everything you do for the community. Because I know, man, you're the hardest working man in airbrushing, man. You're all over the place, man. You're like, remember that Where in the World is Carmen San Diego? We got to do that, something like that. Where in the World is Ken? Because you're everywhere.
That is one thing about COVID-19 is you know where to find me. I'm not away at some trade show somewhere. Yeah. And of course, Gilbert, we should let everyone know that, you know, I talk in my sleep and I probably fart occasionally and grind my teeth and snore. And you're one of the few people who could actually know that from sharing a hotel room with me. So you kind of own me. You probably have shit on me that no one else ever has. So when you ask me to do something, I'm like, I better do it. Otherwise, he might let secrets out that I don't even know he has.
Hey, he's got receipts, man. He's got receipts. Well, Ken, you have a great rest of your weekend, a great Sunday. You're not doing a lazy on Sunday this week, right? It's next week.
No, not this week. We're doing every first and third now, starting. Tell Mom I said hello.
I will.
And God bless, Gilbert. We'll see you later.
You take care, my friend. Have a
Bye now.
Bye-bye. All right, gentlemen, there it is. My good friend Ken from Badger Airbrush. I hope you enjoyed that. We ran a little longer than normal. I'll announce next week's guest. Now, I'm going to go a little different now. I'm going to go into the community and talk to people in the community. Builders. Brian Festa, a member of the Stynylrez Syndicate, friend of mine, he gave me an idea the other day. He asked me, people with disabilities and what the hobby means to them. And it stayed there. It just kept rolling around in my head because I have a disability. And I wanted to discuss that with some people with disabilities. So I'm going to put something like that together. And maybe you guys are interested in that. Let me know. Thanks again, everybody, for watching. I really appreciate it, man. You guys stay safe. The world is pretty messed up as we speak. You got the COVID, you got the protests here in the States, all over the world. You guys stay safe, stay healthy, man. Be good to your families. Love your children. Leave the drama to the queens, my brothers, and by all means, paint or build a model. You guys take care, man. Good night.